And joining us now, Ito Peng. She is the Associate Dean of Interdisciplinary and International Affairs at the University of Toronto. And welcome to TVO.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you here. Well, you know, Japan, for the second largest economy in the world, we actually focus on it very little, it seems. So we want to do a little background here before we talk, just to let people know that Japan is, in fact, a parliamentary government with a constitutional monarchy. Michael, if you would, let's put up the results of the last election in the lower and then the upper house in Japan. In the lower house, 480 seats total. The Democratic Party of Japan has the majority right now, almost two-thirds of the seats. The Liberal Democratic Party, which had basically run Japan almost uninterrupted for all of post-World War II history, is the opposition party now. And then if you go to the upper house, it's a little closer. The Democratic Party's coalition has just over 50% of the seats. The Liberal Democratic Party's coalition with just over a third of the seats there. So those are what the lower and upper houses of the Japanese Diet look like. August 2009, the election takes place, and the Democratic Party of Japan is elected after, as we suggested, almost nonstop rule by the Liberal Democratic Party. Why did Japanese voters want the change?
Well, I think there are three reasons for this. One was that during the 1990s, Japanese economy was doing very, very badly. And as a result, people began to realize that there was a really growing income inequality happening. And a lot of voters in Japan saw that as a result of the kind of old patronage politics that was sort of created by the LDP. I think people were also getting what we call sort of political fatigue over the LDPs, because LDPs had a number of prime ministers who were actually not performing very well.
I know I wasn't going to bring this up until the end, but since Ito mentioned it here, can we bring that list of recent prime ministers of Japan? There it is right there. Okay, Obuchi, 1998 to 2000, this is like a revolving door here. Then you've got Mori, Koizumi, Abe, Fukuda, Aso. These are all Liberal Democratic prime ministers, and as we can see, their tenure in office is not very long. And then Hatoyama from the Democratic Party takes over there. Well, why do the prime ministers over there seem to have the job for such a short period of time?
Well, because they all made mistakes. They would come in, the voters will have a tremendous hope that something will happen. And then within a year or two, these prime ministers shows that they have totally no understanding of what's going on. And basically, these people were delivering same policies dressed up in a different costume.
Okay, so you know that some people have interpreted the Democratic Party's victory as a desire by Japan to move further away from the United States, or at least change the relationship from the way it has been since the end of World War II. Do you agree with that? That's what this is about in some respects?
Well, that was a part of it, but not all the part of it. Foreign policy sort of realigning Japan politically more towards East Asia was a part of the DPJ's policy platform, but the much bigger policy platform was really about change in domestic politics, and that had to do with sort of breaking the old cycle of policy making, moving the policy focus from the old interest group kind of politics based on constructions and industry interest to social welfare, and to sort of introduce new kind of policy innovation.
So it had less to do with foreign affairs and more, you think, to do with domestic affairs. People may not know this, so let's put up a graphic on this as well. The fertility rates in Japan are really quite shockingly low. And if this graphic shows it, I mean, we think in Canada we're not doing too well because we're less than 2. The United States is over 2. The average in the world is 2.5 children born per woman. But look at Japan, well down on the low end. Does government policy, do you think, play a role in the low Japanese birth rate?
Well, government policies in Japan since the 1990s have been really focused on this low birth rate, because this low birth rate has been happening since the beginning of 1990s. And so, and this has been troubling Japanese policymakers a lot, because it has a lot to do with not simply demographic issue, but economic problem. what the demographers project in the future for Japan is that at this rate of fertility, Japan is going to face serious labor shortage, eventual population decline, and along with it, never mind the dependency ratio problem, what Japan will have is a kind of economic slowdown, basically eventual decline of Japan's economic power.
And it's not exactly an immigrant-based society, is it?
No.
So they're not replacing people that way.
Exactly. And so what the LDP government has been doing since the beginning of 1990s has been introducing a series of pronatalist social policies.
Is it working?
Well, that's the interesting part. No. But some of the policies are just fabulous if you take a look at it.
Like what?
For example, in 2001, Koizumi actually went on media saying that he will guarantee a childcare space for any parent who are looking for childcare.
And is that in fact the case now?
Well, the childcare policy is very good, actually. I had 2 children in Japan. I taught in Japan for 7 years.
It is
so
good.
I know. I had my 2 children in the Japanese daycare. I gave birth and went to the local government and said, I have 2 kids. I need childcare. They were saying, okay, fine. Which one would you like to go? It was fabulous.
Do they have a baby bonus as well?
At that time, they had limited baby bonus. The current DPJ government is now bringing in, child allowance for all families with children up to the end of the junior high school, which means 16 years old. So they're doing a lot of, introducing a lot of social policies really to encourage families, young families to have children.
Okay, but how family-friendly are policies really if you look across the board here? I mean, if you're a woman in Japan and you want to have a career and a family, can you do it?
Well, here's the funny thing, and the real disconnect. You've got, on the one hand, government and social policies that are extremely family-friendly. It introduces public child care, all sorts of allowances. On policy, there is a 1-year parental leave, paid parental leave for most of workers, and yet the real problem is that at the employment side, the employers are very, very, very resistant to this kind of behavior. So the workers, even though they have the right to take a year parental leave, for example, many of them don't take parental leave because they're afraid that if they take a year off, the common expression was that you take a year off, your desk gets moved. In other words, you became kind of redundant. You get pressured by your co-workers and the employers to not take that parental leave.
So the government policy is there, but in practice,
in practice, it doesn't work.
And having said that, though, what role do you think female voters played in the change of government that took place last year?
Well, what's interesting is that DPJ's big support was women voters in urban areas, and so urban women voters were very important for them. They supported the DPJ Hatoyama government because they thought that the new government will bring real change, particularly in social policy.
Now, admittedly, this new government hasn't been in power for even a year yet.
No.
But can you say? But you look in the United States, and people are writing the obituary of the Obama government. They've only been in for a year, so people make harsh and quick judgments about politics these days. Are they making harsh and quick judgments about the new government in Japan?
This government has made some really good changes, but it's faced with a number of obstacles. So the judgment toward this government is really mixed. And I have to say, so far, it's not that, it's not very positive. Well, some of the good the changes that they have made are, for example, they have actually, the government has actually pledged and will be introducing the child allowance, universal child allowance. The amount of the child allowance is half of what it had pledged. So in the way, it is trying to do what it said it will do. Mm-hmm. The problem with the current government is that it's faced with serious fiscal problems. One is that people are now beginning to wonder where that money is going to come from, particularly when they say they will not raise tax.
Sure.
And so government is kind of caught in a hard place where they have to find money for that. Secondly, the Japanese economy is still not doing very, very well. And so people are now worried that as governments spend more money on these things, that they're not paying attention to the sort of employment side. People might lose jobs over this.
And it's about jobs, jobs, jobs.
Exactly.
I want to do one follow-up with you on the issue of women in politics.
Okay.
And we'll bring a graphic up here to show women in national parliaments in 3 different countries in the world, including Japan. Here we've broken it up into the lower house and then the upper house, the red and the blue bars. The Netherlands, which is very high in the Western world. Canada, we're somewhere in the middle. And Japan, still quite low female representation in politics. However, having said that, there are more women in politics in Japan today, obviously, than there were, say, 25 years ago. Does the increased number of women in Japanese politics, is it having an influence in terms of policy?
Well, my personal thought is no, not so far. There are some very good Japanese women politicians, but some of the previous women politicians have not been all that effective, in a way that they are not much different from the male politicians. Take, for example, LDP's Tanaka Makiko. Very strong woman. She was a foreign minister under LDP, under Obuchi and Hashimoto. Her father was ex-prime minister, very strong woman. And yet she was not able to make great sort of dent in terms of addressing women's interests. In fact, women's interest was not really her interest either. So in a way, the representation thus far has not sort of translated necessarily to women's sort of advancement in women's participation.
Okay, but I'm told in the new government there are several kind of young, attractive, up-and-coming female politicians. Have they not had an impact?
Well, they're very interesting, but we don't quite know yet. A lot of them are actually coming up with interesting ideas, but I think it's still early in the days, and right now DPJ is really caught in this quagmire of a lot of scandals, a lot of sort of forward, backward kind of motion. So I think that a lot of new ideas are yet to come out. So far they're doing a lot of sort of forward push on the original election pledge, and then kind of pulling back in the areas where they're receiving a lot of hits.
Ito, we've got one more minute here, and I want to do one last question with you. We went through that list of how the prime ministers seem to change over and over again, and yet Japanese society doesn't seem to change all that much. And I wonder if you could talk just for a minute here about the civil service. The power of the civil service is so strong, and their interests, I gather, tend to trump whatever power any Japanese prime minister would have. And if that's the case, can people over there really expect to see much change?
Actually, this is an area where there might be some changes happening, because since DPJ took over power in September, they have been having serious fights with the bureaucrats. Their big issue, they have been really fighting hard about Amakudari issue, which is this golden parachute program, basically sort of trying to cut the kind of links between the politician and the bureaucrat that existed during the LDP days, trying to cut down the power of the bureaucrats and really to strengthen the policy-making process in the parliamentary committee rather than within the hands of the bureaucrats. So it's happening, but bureaucrats are fighting back pretty hard. So this is an area that's really going to be interesting to watch.
Very good. Ito Peng from the U of T, thanks for coming in tonight
you.
and sharing your views on Japan for us.
Thank you.